I got to tell you, this one was fun. Something was brought to my attention recently on Discord. A lot of pitchers' arm angles have dropped, and they are pitchers that are young studs for their teams. I'll show you what I mean. My guy, Branch Terminal, posted this tweet and it's like, hey, I know it's been one start, but is any of this stuff significant? Usually arm angles dropping can be a sign of something is wrong, a concern of injury, or fatigue. Like, you don't raise your arm up if you're getting tired or you're hurt. You raise your arm up when you're trying to feel something with the ball. You're trying to be on top of it or whatever. So usually arms raising are some sort of mechanical change, and arms lowering could be something else that might be more concerning. We got Skeens, Reagans, and Crochet. So this is 3 young dudes who are all aces for their teams that we believe have a good opportunity to be in the Cy Young case. So what I actually care about is right here, the arm angle fallers. And those are significant numbers, okay? So at first I was like, okay, it's the first start of the year, okay? So things are a little bit wonky. You're going up maybe to some colder weather. That changes things a little bit. You're trying to grip the ball a little bit. You're trying to get the ball to spin differently. Or in Crochet's case, he threw a ton of cutters. When you're throwing cutters, you're trying to get inside the ball a little bit. And your muscle memory is not quite there to throwing a full speed. Also, there's adrenaline. There's all kinds of things happening because it's exciting, it's opening day. It's just a culture shock in a lot of different ways. So sometimes that stuff factors in. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna give this a couple weeks. We'll see if this stuff kind of evens out.
2 weeks later.
I was just watching MLB Network one day, and Jake Peavy was up mentioning that Paul Skeens' arm angles has changed a little bit, but they weren't explaining it from his arm angle's going down, what's wrong with him? They were explaining it from, he's added 2 new pitches. We talked ad nauseum about this. He added a sinker and a cutter, and all of his arm angles have kind of melded to be about the same for every pitch. Maybe those angles were converging in order to get some tunneling better, or maybe that's something cleaned up in the offseason. What they didn't mention was the fact that all the numbers were low. All of his angles had dropped, not just his fastball, okay? Then, literally that same day, about an hour later, I am scrolling Instagram, and this post pops up from the Velo University on Instagram. Shout out to them for doing this. The lower the slot, the lower the risk. And I was like, what does that mean? What it did was mention a study. The lower you drop your arm, the less stress you put on your joints, on your elbow and on your shoulder. And I was like, that bodes the question. Are these young guys doing this on purpose? Is this the new thing that pitchers are going to be doing? And there's 2 studies that I actually found after following this first one. And then I wanted to see, are these guys doing any of this stuff? Is this information that they got very recently that they have implemented into their game? Because all 3 of them, the big 3, I'll talk about Crochet, we'll talk about Reagans, and we'll talk about Skeens, they all want to throw more innings. They've all said that explicitly in public. They want to be aces. They want to go for that 200 innings. They want to be the guy that takes the ball game 1 going into October. That's who they want to be. And in order to stay healthy, you need cleaned up mechanics. And Crochet and Reagan specifically have struggled with injuries in the past where they missed significant amounts of time. So these guys want to stay healthy. Maybe they're making some of these changes. So let's talk a little bit about the studies. All right. Study number 1, this research looks at how different parts of the pitcher's motion, like your trunk tilt, your elbow bend, and your shoulder position, affect the amount of torque or stress on the elbow, which is closely linked to Tommy John. So their goal was, how do these different factors increase or decrease your chance of needing Tommy John eventually? That's a big question that a lot of people in this game are asking these days, right? They took a sample size of over 400 pro and college pitchers, 500 actually. That's a big sample size. There's a thing in Major League stadiums called Hawkeye. What it does is it mocaps your body in real time and gets a bunch of data points on how your body's moving when you're on the mound. And it knows everything about everybody, all the swings. It keeps track of everyone. It's a little creepy if you think about it. And they successfully found some stuff. 11 specific parts of delivery explain 40% of the stress in your elbow, which could be the difference between Tommy John and not Tommy John, okay? Here's what they came up with. Harder you throw, the more stress in your arm. Duh, all right? More shoulder abduction at foot contact. Basically, the higher your arm is when your foot hits the ground, the more likely you are to put more stress in your elbow. The more elbow flexion at foot contact, the more your arm is bent back when your foot hits the ground. That was something I struggled with, right? Yes, you might throw harder, but you are also in danger of getting hurt. Elbow extension, how quickly are you extending your arm? Another thing that you can't really avoid as a pitcher. And more trunk tilt towards your glove. So the more you lean this way, raises your arm up. So you're getting both. You're raising your arm up and you're creating trunk tilt, which is creates more torque as well. So that hurts. The more you turn sideways like this, the more your elbow hurts. That's something that I can also attest to. I did do that quite a bit. So they basically said the higher your arm goes, the more you might get hurt, but we don't know how much. So then we had our second study. Arm slot angles affect elbow, shoulder joint torque in elite and college pitchers. Now, they only used a sample size of 70 people, but they wanted to know how much arm angle affects you. They wanted to actually like quantify and give you numbers. That if you drop it 10 degrees, you get this much. What they came up with, that for every 10 degrees it drops, you get 5% less torque in your elbow. That is a lot. And that is wildly interesting. That doesn't mean you just drop your elbow, right? And that doesn't mean it actually means you drop it like this. It means maybe you stand up taller or whatever. A lot of things can affect your arm angle. You also get to a point where once you get to sidearm, so like when you're straight out like this, I'll go left-handed. When you're straight out like this is considered 0 degrees. Below this is when velocity starts to disappear. The hardest pitch ever thrown under 0 degrees is by Tim Hill, and it's 91.4 miles an hour. That's the hardest pitch ever thrown under 0. That's crazy. I didn't know Tim Hill had a record either.
Boom. Roasted.
In here, you can get a little bit less stress by finding your neutral, where you are neutrally, where's the most neutral place your shoulder can be positioned in order to be healthy. And they found this. It's really, really well cited. They measured a lot of those same points in space that the original one did, and it was the 5%. Now let's look at those three guys and see what they're actually doing that is making their shoulder or their arm angle drop, and if they're doing it on purpose. This is Garrett Crochet. This is 2024. He was 38 degrees, and now he's at 31 degrees, okay? I know based on the little guy, it doesn't look that difference, but here's a little overlay. He is the most egregiously changed. Here's why his arm has actually dropped. So here's him from this year, and here's him from last year. You see that trunk tilt? This guy was sideways, and that puts his arm way up there. This is well over 7 degrees, I'll be honest, but like, that's a huge difference. So it seems like trunk tilt is the thing that he was worried about. It's funny, if you really look at his arm in relation to his body, it's pretty similar. So if he were standing up at the same angle, the arm angle would be fairly similar. But in the top one, the old one too, his wrist is flexed in like this a little bit. And this other one, he is very neutral. It's all straight. This looks very smooth. This change would be something that Andrew Bailey would say, hey, do you want to stay healthy and you want to throw 200 innings? This is the way to do it. And maybe these changes are the reason that the Red Sox are like, we're going to take a chance on this guy. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. But what about Paul Skeens? Paul Skeens was 23 degrees last year. He's 18 this year. That's a drop of 8 or 5 degrees. I noticed it when watching him. I'm like, that's lower. Here's his overlay. He's slightly taller. See, he tilted a little bit last year. That little outline is him in the background. This one's him this year. He's much more upright, and his angle has naturally dropped. He's not trying to drop his arm. His angle has naturally dropped. So I believe it's the tilt that guys are fixing in order to save their arms, and that this study is something that these guys are being told by their teams or maybe by the academies that they work with in the offseason. We also have Cole Reagans. Cole Reagans was really high. Look how much tilt there is there. You can't really see it that much here, but his arm and his shoulder is slightly more upright, slightly. So he's made a slighter change, and he has actually got more extension too, which has dropped him a little bit as well. Again, you can see his wrist it's stuck in. Now it's more neutral. So the combination of the looser wrist plus the taller, more upright, better trunk tilt forward is taking stress off these guys' elbows, and we might see them pitch deeper into games. I would pay attention to this stuff. When you see an arm dropping, see what happens with the hips and the upper body, especially if you have kids that are learning how to pitch and want to keep their elbow healthy. It seems like there is very, very compelling data that tells us that these are the changes that are going to keep you healthiest the longest. What would you say the college pitcher Ninja interviewed? Are we talking about the guy who was like this? That guy is going to get hurt if that's who we're talking about. I believe that is who you're talking about. There is a pitcher who has almost got his arm so far up over his head that it's negative. That is not going to be sustainable. He is going to hurt himself, probably. A guy who really actually protected his arm but not his lower body was Tim Lincecum. He was a prime example of mega tilt in order to generate the power he had. And what actually ended up happening was his hips went. Parts are going to wear out if they're not working efficiently. It's all about extension versus contraction. If you can stay in your range of motion more often with the maximized power, the more healthy you're going to stay. That's just the way that it works. And that's why Lincecum's career wasn't quite as long as a lot of people would have liked to see for sure. What do you think? Do you think these guys stay healthy? I'm confident now. I just after reading all this stuff, that is why arm angles seem to be lowering and staying low.